I've been on vacation. Back from vacation and back to work. Thomas Morstead at age 39.
The Boxing Week sale at Leon's is on now. Save big on furniture and mattress.
So they say anytime you hear something related to the subject of commerce, there's only one type of court that can hear it. Maritime or Admiralty Court, which they say is the same thing. They say if you want to learn what maritime is, see the word Admiralty. You want to know what Admiralty is, see the word maritime. All right? Then what else? They say they got this thing called maritime bills. They got maritime causes of action. There's another one I was looking for. They got a maritime contract. Here we go. Oh, there we go. What's a maritime contract? Oh, a contract related to business of navigation. A contract whose subject matter is related to the navigation of the seas or to trade and commerce. All right, you get it? I know it's annoying. Oh, he keeps saying the same thing. Yep, because that's how it works. That's how you learn stuff. You got to see it a million times and like, oh, I'm putting the pieces together. All right. They say it again. What's a maritime court? A court exercising jurisdiction in maritime causes, one which possesses the powers and jurisdiction of the court of Admiralty.
2 yards against the San Francisco defense.
All the definition.
Bryce Hall, Memphis, Leah Davis, UCF, Jordan Elliott, Missouri, Samuel Kawanu, Maryland, go Terps. Tatum Bethune, Florida State. D Winners, TCU.
Darrell Luter, South Alabama.
Western Kentucky. Miles Mustafa, Polo Ridge Elementary. Jair Brown, Penn State. San Francisco Hyena, Howard University. The North, their top corner. This Niner defense, as Chris said, without those stars, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, they still have come up with some big plays. They are last in sacks this year. They get pressure on Oregon tonight. Monunga, get inside, across the 21. Melissa, what about somebody on that Chicago front who's not feeling 100% tonight?
Yes, Bears right tackle Darnell Wright. He was so sick yesterday, he didn't fly with the team. He flew out of Chicago, left at 6:30 a.m. Chicago time this morning, landed in San Jose at 8:30 local time and arrived at the team hotel around 9 a.m., got treatment and rest before departing for the stadium with the rest of the team. The Bears told me they thought he was trending in the right direction or they would not have brought him here. We'll see how he holds up.
Illness has been a problem in third and four. Williams first, DJ Moore. Jair Brown knocks it away. And Chris, that's a couple of 3 and outs in the Chicago offense to begin.
So, first of all, they don't play a lot of man coverage, and they had everybody up here. They don't blitz a lot. They sent a little pressure on this one. But it was on that drive, Jair Brown was down in the box, playing the run on the first two. Man coverage on third down, that was his sequence right there.
Is over all seizures.
Brown helps bring the punting unit
and over all
Bears,
revenue.
Troy Taylor.
Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear those things. Why? Because these are private matters. These are not things related to law. These are things related to international, foreign relations. All right? That's the United States Supreme Court. That's the United States Supreme Court. Okay, here we go. It's my favorite one. They said, this is water, by the way, for anybody who... they say this power of admiralty is extensive upon land as upon water. They said the Constitution makes no distinction in that respect. They say this admiralty thing works in Idaho the same way it works in Miami, the same way it works in California or Fresno or San Diego, or if you go up northeast, the same way it works in Maine or New York or Boston Harbor. They say this admiralty thing works in the middle of Oklahoma. They said this power is extensive upon land as upon water. They said the Constitution makes no distinction in that respect. They say this admiralty jurisdiction is in matters of contract, which the courts of the United States, which are federal courts, may lawfully exercise. They say they exercise this thing to contracts that are on land. They say this admiralty thing may also embrace this thing called vehicles and persons. They say it would be in the power of Congress. Why? Because Congress says they have the power to regulate commerce. Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear issues of commerce. They say it would be within the power of Congress to confer admiralty jurisdiction upon its courts over cars engaged in transporting passengers or merchandise. Oh, there goes that word mer again.
Right there, and he was down on the field, and they just don't have that much depth at the
They say this thing called admiralty denies the parties a trial by jury. It's raining. Sorry, it's raining where I'm at, I think. Or the wind. It don't matter. But they say this thing called admiralty denies people a trial by jury. That's very important. There's only one thing in the United States Constitution that can deny you a trial by jury, and that is an admiralty court. How do you know if you're in an admiralty court or not? Well, is the jury there? Because the jury is supposed to be the judges of the law and the facts. I got a million Supreme Court cases that say it from every state. The jury are the judges. So if you end up in front of a guy in a black robe, well, there's only one type of court that can be, and that's an admiralty court. Even if they don't call it admiralty. All right, what they say, you can be in there over the issue of vehicles. Okay, well, if you're in there over the issue of vehicles, okay, well, guess what kind of court that is? Right? They say this admiralty court denies the parties a trial by jury. They say they got these things called informations that are filed in the court for forfeiture, seizures of property, breach of revenue laws, navigation and trade and impost. And they say they got a little thing called admiralty/commerce. All right, let me see what else. I'm not going to read all this, but for those who don't know, I'm reading this book, by the way. I have the digital version of this book. I'm reading this book. I'm just reading the digital version of this book. This is almost 300 pages of verifiable information about understanding the courts. This is my book. I created it. The United States Supreme Court says this admiralty thing is extensive upon land as it is upon water. So anytime somebody tells you, oh, they only do admiralty upon water, they lying straight to your face. Why? Because they know we don't know better. All right. They say the United States Supreme Court said proceedings in causes of equity and of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction are according to the course of civil law. All right, I'll get into that in real quick. They say admiralty acts only in rem. I'm going to get into that. In rem. And no person can be subject to that jurisdiction but by his consent on a contract. All right, let's see here. All right, this is the United States Supreme Court. They said it is well known that in civil cases of courts of equity and admiralty, juries do not intervene. That's the number one thing you need to know about an admiralty court is you do not get a jury. Why? The jury is the law of the land. The jury is of the common law of England. All right, so anything outside of the common law of England would be by nature international law, right? They don't say international law in the Constitution. What do they say? They say commerce, they say admiralty and maritime jurisdiction or treaties. Okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear those issues, and that's an admiralty court, right? So they say it is well known. They say we should have known this. Courts of admiralty and equity, juries do not intervene. This is the number one thing they complained about in the Declaration of Independence, and the year before the Declaration of Independence, and the year before the Declaration of Independence. They said that's the number one thing we are strapping up and dropping bodies about is that they are not giving us a trial by jury. All right, so how do you know you're in an admiralty court? You're going before a guy in a black robe to hear the whole cause. He's supposed to be officiating the tribunal, the ceremony. But his job is to get you to the jury because the jury are the judges. And I got a million cases. I'm not going to go into it right now. But there's a million cases that say the jury are the judges of the law. For instance, I know the Constitution of Indiana and the Constitution of Illinois says that. And then the federal constitution says that the trial of all crimes shall be by jury. That's a command. That's not a suggestion. You can't waive it. The Supreme Court of New York said it couldn't be waived. All right, so they say the protections of the Constitution can take effect only. Say you want the protections of the Constitution, you got to go do that common law stuff. They said the laws and practices of the states cannot be referred to in reference to maritime or admiralty. They said because no equity existed in the states. They said maritime law is too imperfect and unsettled to furnish any basis for the Department of Law of the states. All right, let me see here. I don't want to go. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to read like 2 more cases, then I'll keep going.
They all think is going to be great, but it's just
proceedings, the nature of the information would be the complaint. They call it a libel or they call it an information. Does not require all of the precision of an indictment at common law. Why? At common law, you got to have an injured party. You got to follow due process. You can't just be, the government just can't go after people. That's the common law of England, which is the law of the states. They say in admiralty law is based on international law. We don't do that common law stuff.
Let's watch Bethune here on this one.
Oh, yeah, that common law, that was old Britain. They don't do that no more. That's because they lying to us. But admiralty,
and Loveland's going to run a little corner route to the outside.
The nature of an information does not require all of the precision of an indictment at common law. Why? Because at common law, it requires
He's going to get his hands on it.
Somebody said, wow, no equity exists in the state. No, equity is an international term. I'm going to make that's going to be another, that'll be another live stream. Tonight is just on admiralty. Like yesterday was just on commerce. I'm going to make a whole live stream about admiralty. Admiralty is a total scam. Everybody who's talking about admiralty, I bet 1,000 Federal Reserve notes there. That's not the common law. That's not what the states are founded upon. And only one thing can take a jury away from you. That is equity and admiralty. And then I'm actually going to read you some stuff later that say equity and admiralty are the same thing. So it's all
39th overall pick.
Yeah, that's
Kicks
another
up
day.
a first down. Chris, they are raving
makes me
about
mad
this
more than
player
anything.
and his chance.
All right, because people have no clue what equity is.
It's just
They're
to grow
mad.
along
Let me
with
stop.
Caleb Williams.
I think he's really going to be special. I do, and he's going to be playing a lot in the slot tonight. Olamide Zaccheaus, their usual slot, is out with the illness. This guy, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but he has put up some numbers on yards per play.
Claims from the government which require no injured party.
And he's been in the passing game that ranked with the top players in the National Football League.
The common law we have adopted in this state. In the same case, they say this common law is the opposite
of the Green Bay
of the civil law rules. What is the civil law?
Swift.
That is the Roman law. I'm going to get into it in a second. The civil law is the Roman law.
Delivering a
And under
blow after
Roman
a
law,
gain
you got
of
admiralty,
8.
equity,
Bethune
commercial
coming all
law,
the way across.
corporation, business, all of that stuff comes from Rome.
To make the play, Rome Odunze is the top
So the
receiver
Supreme
for
Court
this
of Texas said
Bears
the
team
common
out
law
for his
is
4th
the rule
game.
of decision in Texas. We adopted this in this state, and the opposite is the civil law. So
With a
what's the
stress
opposite
fracture
of the
in his
common
foot.
law?
The good news, talking to Ben
Or
Johnson
what's the
last night,
opposite of the
they
Roman
feel like
law?
they'll
The
get
opposite of the
Odunze
Roman law is the common law of England, as it relates to Texas.
back, if not next week,
Because Texas is
against
its
the
own
Lions
nation,
for the
right?
first
Just
round
like Idaho
playoff
is
game.
its own nation,
That's
just like New York is its own nation, just like California is its own nation.
Good
So
for
if there
you.
was no
Well,
other
and
state,
that's sort of the Trent Williams
Texas said,
decision here
well,
as well.
our
If he
law
really
is
does
the
have a
common law of
hamstring
England.
injury,
All right, here we go. I read this a couple nights ago.
all of a sudden, do you
Thomas
want to risk it
Jefferson
here, or are you
said
going to
in
risk it in the playoffs?
1775 that statutes have been passed for extending the courts of admiralty, the jurisdiction of the courts of admiralty beyond their
Williams
ancient
inside, there goes
limits.
Cole Kmet.
What were their
3
ancient
blockers
limits?
ahead of them, and submarine by Bethune.
We talked about it. Commerce. Yep. Commerce. The
Two
Phoenicians,
of
the
them, and a
Canaanites, the
flag comes
Phoenicians,
down,
the
2 of
merchants.
them,
That's their
as
ancient
he's brought
limits.
down at the 49-yard line.
Thomas Jefferson said, sorry, that statutes have been passed for extending the jurisdiction of the courts of admiralty beyond their ancient limits, for depriving us
2
of
of them,
the
and a flag
accustomed
comes
and
down, 2 of
inestimable
them, as
privilege
he's
of
brought
a
down at the
trial
49-yard
by
line.
jury. There's only one thing that can deprive you of a trial by jury in this country, and that is admiralty courts. All right.
Personal foul. Illegal block below the waist.
Let's see.
Defense number
Here's one more
48.
thing I wanted to
15
read.
minutes and added on to the end of the one. First down.
Yeah, just to the
Boom. This is the United States Supreme Court. They said next to
few
revenue,
years ago to try to protect the others out there in
jurisdiction
Bethune
of the admiralty
is caught. Adds
are
50.
our greatest grievance. They said the courts of admiralty seem to be forming to overturn
bring the ball
our
into Niners
constitution
territory.
and
It's
to
interesting. He
deprive
went
us
through the
of our best inheritance, the laws of the land. They said this thing called revenue, which is under, they said that's a huge grievance. And then they said next to that, next to taxes, the jurisdiction of admiralty is our greatest grievance. They said that's the number one thing that is forming to overturn our constitution and to deprive us of our best inheritance, the laws of the land. What's the laws of the land? The common law of England. All right. And that's all I was going to read from that. All right. Now, let's read some other stuff. Let's see here. So this is the Supreme Court of California. The Supreme Court of California said that, let me go to this and then I'll go to that. All right. So admiralty and maritime jurisdiction in the Constitution. What does that mean? Okay, where does admiralty and maritime come from? It comes from the civil law. It comes, the definition of the word civil law is the Roman law. Okay? the definition of the word civil law and all that it entails means the exact same word, Roman law. They say ecclesiastical law comes from the Roman law. Equity law comes from the Roman law. We already talked about commerce. Well, that comes from the Roman law. I got an English law book that says if you want to understand the Roman law, you got to go study Babylon because that's where they got it from. And then I'm going to turn it around again. They said if you want to study Roman law, then you got to go to Babylon because that's where they got it from. What we now know to be Roman law. Okay, well that, in order to know what that is, you got to keep going back. They say, if you want to know what Roman law is, okay, well, you got to go study Babylonian law. They say, you want to study Babylonian law. I actually have law books that say this stuff. Okay, well, you got to go to Egypt. Okay, well, if you want to know the Egypt, you can go to the Bible. And they're going to tell you about these people called the Canaanites. And then you can follow the trajectory of the Canaanites to the Phoenicians to the merchants, all right? So all of this stuff, if you want to understand Roman law, which is today called the civil law. So anytime you look up the word civil law, they're going to say anytime you hear the words municipal, corporation, business, commerce, all of this stuff, admiralty and maritime is under the Roman civil law. They say this word is interchangeable. Matter of fact, I'll pull up the definition. Let's see. Yeah, let's do this one. ABC. Site civil. All right. There we go. Perfect. What is civil law? They say civil law, Roman law, and Roman civil law are convertible phrases. They mean the exact same system of jurisprudence. What is jurisprudence? That's the consciousness of the law. It's the same thing. It means the exact same system of law. All right, the exact same thinking. They say this is the rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law. So they say anytime you hear the word municipal, that it is of the civil law, which is called the Roman law. Right? So anytime you hear the word municipal law, they say this word municipal law is to distinguish it from the law of nature. Then they tell you this thing called municipal law, which is occupied with the exposition and enforcement of civil rights. Okay, well, what does civil mean? It means Roman. That's literally what the word means. Let's see here. They said the exposition and enforcement of civil rights. They said this system of jurisprudence held and administered in the Roman Empire. So they say anytime you hear the word relating to civil law, it means Roman law, Roman civil law. Anytime you hear municipal, it is related to Roman law. They say anytime you hear this, it is administered in the Roman Empire. Who is this? This is the Supreme Court of Louisiana. Why would Louisiana know this? Because they are founded, their law in Louisiana is the Roman law. They call it French law. They call it Napoleonic. Okay, well, you study France. They've been under Rome forever. Okay? So they say this is the system of jurisprudence held and administered in the Roman Empire, particularly as set forth in the compilation of Justinian and his successors. Okay, well, go look up who Justinian is. He was a Roman emperor. And they say you can find this Roman civil law in the Code of Justinian, the Digest, and the novels called the Corpus Juris Civilis, which is the name of the body of civil law. And they say that this is distinguished or the opposite of the common law of England. Okay. So what's the opposite of jurisdiction is under, okay? And that's the Supreme Court of Louisiana. They say this Roman law is used in contradistinction to the laws of England and those of the respective states. Boom. That's the Supreme Court of Louisiana under the definition in a law dictionary of Roman law. All right. So, civil law, Roman law, same thing. Under Roman and civil law, you have ecclesiastical law. Under ecclesiastical law, they use no jury. They use priests who wear robes and conduct ceremonies. Does this make sense? So how do you know you're in an admiralty court? There's no jury. That's the number one reason. That's the number one thing they wanted after the Revolutionary War. They said, we just want our trial by jury and we want due process. Okay, well, under ecclesiastical law, you don't get that. So they said, this is how you know you're in admiralty court. No jury. All right, so we already defined admiralty and maritime. All right. In rem, in personam. All right, I got a bunch of stuff on that. Let me see how long. Oh, I've only been on here an hour. Oh, y'all ain't getting no real work. All right, let's see here. In rem, they said. Let me see. There we go. There we go. All right, I forgot. This is under the definition of courts. I'm talking about the word admiralty in the United States Constitution. They said the word, this is under the definition of courts. So they say under the subtitle, suits on contracts. So any type of lawsuit related to contracts, they said as a court of admiralty, this court has jurisdiction. Jurisdiction on what? On contracts. They said the same may be made or executed on whatever form of the contract. So any contract is under a court of admiralty. All right. So even if you don't think it's a contract, if you end up in front of one guy in a black robe instead of the people, okay, well, then you know what type of court it is. All right. So they said as a court of admiralty, it possesses a general jurisdiction. What is a general jurisdiction? What's jurisdiction? The power of the courts to hear and decide a case. All right. They possess suits in rem, R-E-M, and in personam. All right. So in rem and in personam. And if you don't believe me, go to whatever state code you have and search the phrase in rem. In rem, R-E-M, in space rem. So you can be in rem. All right. The word in rem means a thing. And that's a Latin phrase, and it means jurisdiction over a thing. All right. So they say it again. Okay, well, what is in persona? They say proceedings against, this is jurisdiction of the courts to have proceedings against a person. Okay, well, what's a person? To them, a person is not me and you. A person is a legal fiction. It is a corporation. All right. It is a fiction first and foremost. What is a fiction? In our reality,
what's up, Hazy? I'm glad you're here.
Just to be real clear,
this is some good explanation, right? It takes a long time.
It's a piece of paper. It's a fake piece of plastic, right? It's not real. It's a.
There's just a lot of reading, but check it out.
And to be in personam is to wear a mask. So they say there's two types of persons in law. You have a natural person, which is identified by your face, and then they say they have a fictitious person, which is to wear a mask. Okay, well, a state ID is not real, right? They may call it real ID, but there's no such thing as a real ID because there's no ID that is actually real. It's a piece of paper. It's a photograph. It's not real. It's not you. You're not a piece of plastic, right? So in reality, they're really not making judgments against you. They're making judgments against that state ID or that driver's license or what I'm about to get into, in rem. Okay, well, they say in rem is proceedings or actions constituted against or instituted against a thing. All right, well, what is the thing? You wouldn't believe how many things we got that is in their jurisdiction. All right, every bank account is in rem. Every car, almost every car, unless you're rich, which you wouldn't be watching me if you were rich. I'm not rich either, is in rem. What else? I mean, really, probably every piece of paper. If you've registered anything, I don't want to get too conspiracy theorist, or I don't want to scare anybody, but like, it's a lot of, in a nutshell, just to make it simplified. If it can be seized before the court proceeding, before you go to court, if it can be taken, if it can be seized, if it can be frozen, if it can be towed before you go to court, okay, well, that's a thing in rem, because that's what admiralty is. What is an admiralty? What is an admiral? Well, he's the chief officer in the Navy. Well, what's a Navy? It's a military. So they want you to think that this is military jurisdiction. This is a tribunal. Yep, the word property. If you've ever registered property, or if your property is in their system, in the public domain. Okay, well, to them, that's in rem. If they can show up and take it before you go to court over the issue, okay, because due process says you can't take people's life or property before court, before the court case. All right, I'm working on a book on false imprisonment. Well, you're not supposed to be put in handcuffs before the court case, unless they actually got you for a breach of peace, which always means violence, which always means an injured party. But that's another topic for another day. So they say, okay, in rem is proceedings against the thing. All right. So in Latin, they say in rem. In English, they say against the thing. All right. Well, if they can seize it before the court case, well, then that's how you know it is a proceeding in rem. All right. So if somebody makes a claim, or something, or some corporation or organization makes a claim against you, and they can seize that thing before the court case, before the judgment has been had, okay, that's how you know you're in an admiralty court, or that's how you know that's an admiralty action. All right, they said the courts of admiralty enforce the performance of a contract. By what? By seizing it. I told y'all earlier that word seizing is a commercial term, into their custody. So they said, this is how we start to act. This is how we started off rip. We got to take it first. Well, that's how you know it's an admiralty. This is what they fought the Revolutionary War over. They said cases of admiralty are either in personam or in rem. And then here we go. I forgot about these. Let me zoom in. They say a policy of insurance is in rem. They say, yada, yada, yada. They say in all civilized countries, what does civil mean? Roman, is governed by the same rules. All Europe have derived their maritime codes from the Mediterranean. They said in this country, the United States Supreme Court said in this country, we got ours from the Consulado del Mare. Okay, well, what's that? That's the law of the sea. Mare. That word M with an A or ER is sea. They said the jurisdiction of the admiralty in matters of contract depends on the character of the contract, whether maritime or not. So they don't even have to call it maritime. That you could just be in a contract, and there's only one type of court that can hear it. They said it has been settled that the common law is the law of Maryland. And they said maritime law following the civil law gives the party a lien. There you go. That's another commercial term for security to maintain a suit in rem in the admiralty. But they said in cases of the state, no lien is to be implied. Why? Because Maryland's law, just like your state law, is the common law of England. And at common law, you're not allowed to take people's stuff before the court proceeding. You can take it after a judgment, a lawful judgment of your peers, because that's what the Magna Carta says. So how do you know it's admiralty? If they say that's how they start the court. That's how they start the court action. They take it first. Okay, they're not allowed to do that in the States. They say a jurisdiction of the admiralty may be enforced in personam as well as in rem. They say the true doctrine of the learned judges of the admiralty say that the judges or the jurisdiction of contracts depends upon the subject matter and not if it's admiralty or maritime or not. That's a district court of Massachusetts. So they say they don't have to call it admiralty. If it fits within our subject matter, which is all federal, by the way, okay, well, that's what they say. This is another definite or translation of the word in rem is subject matter. I forgot to say that. So they'll say a thing in plain English, but they're going to say subject matter. If they use the word subject matter, okay, well, there's only one type of court that can hear subject matter things. All right. Let's see here. So that was in rem part 1. In rem part 2, they got some Latin. Let's see here. I don't know if any of this is necessary. Oh, they got this thing called quarrels. This is an ancient English term that says they create quarrels by in rem and in personam. Quarrels is actually under the term of barratry. And there's only one type of people that can do barratry, and they're called attorneys. All right. They say in admiralty law, a ship or cargo is arrested, and they are arrested by a marshal with a writ of an action in rem. This is all admiralty. Let me see. They say cargo may be proceeded against in the respect of any liability. The cargo may be arrested. So what gets arrested? People are not supposed to be arrested. Only property can be arrested. This is nasty. This is nasty, y'all. That's why they don't show my live to nobody. They let the scammer get to. I seen a scammer get 170 people watching his live today. I said, come on, man, that dude's straight lying. They don't talk about you can't tell the truth on here, boy. All right. They say only property can be arrested. They say only ships and cargo may be arrested as security for the freight that may be due. They said if the cargo be aboard the ship, it can be proceeded against and named in a warrant. Oh, they say this word warrant is a maritime term. They said the cargo will be warehoused. Okay, well, what's a warehouse? Well, today they call it a jail. Then they called it a warehouse. They probably still call it a warehouse on the sea. And they say a separate arrest can be made for the property or the ship, depending on the issue. So they say an arrest binds the whole of the property, however great the value, however trifling the amount of the claim. They say a person having a possessory lien. That's a commercial term. He must surrender the property to the marshal and rely upon the court to protect him in his... No, that ain't how that's supposed to work. So yeah, they got a whole bunch of stuff here. Every time you hear the word in rem, go to your code, go to your state codes, type in rem. See if a million codes and statutes don't come up. Everything's in rem now, baby. Everything. So they got a whole bunch of stuff. I'm trying to see if there's anything I need to highlight. But yeah, they got a whole bunch of stuff on in rem. Let me see. In rem, proceedings or actions against the thing. Personal actions are in personam. So you're saying if the courts are operating under maritime law, a lot of the actions against people are improper. I'm saying every action against people are improper. The states are not supposed to be doing admiralty law. So admiralty law, that's why this is specifically related to the federal constitution. The feds do have admiralty and maritime jurisdiction because it's primarily dealing with international things. Now, they both abuse it. The states are not ever supposed to be doing admiralty, and the feds are not supposed to be doing admiralty against people in the states. So we got two issues. We have the states who are not supposed to be doing admiralty at all. They're never supposed to be seizing property or enforcing admiralty actions, either in personam or in rem. And then the feds are not supposed to be enforcing it against the states. They're only supposed to be enforcing it internationally, things that are upon the waters of international sea or upon the sea, which are international waters, right? But they're using these in metaphysical terms. And then now this is equally our fault because we have been ignorant and also participate in these actions, right? Because of our ignorance, they get to abuse their power. Is court in international water? If you end up before one guy in a black robe to decide your life or property, yes. If a trial by jury is a lawful court in the states. We were never supposed to be dealing with the feds. The feds are for international things. That's what the federal constitution is about. So people always talk about the common or the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Okay, well, that ain't for us. We have a constitution. Our states have constitutions. If you live in Florida, Florida has a constitution, and that is the supreme law of the land for Florida. Texas has a constitution. Idaho has a constitution. Oklahoma got a constitution. California got a constitution. And not one time will you find in any of the state constitutions anything related to admiralty or maritime jurisdiction. They don't have the power to do it. But they do it every day, don't they? They do it every day. All right. Let me see. Who is this? Okay. This is a very important case. I'm gonna give you this case. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I will just Google 95 US 714. So 95 US 714. It's I think it's called Panower versus Neff. This is a Supreme Court case. They will tell you that is one of the great cases that will teach you about jurisdiction and in rem. All right, that's a very good case. Everybody should be reading and knowing that case. They say jurisdiction is acquired in one or two modes: against the person by the service of process or by a procedure against the property. Okay, that's in rem. They say within the jurisdiction, the defendant is not personally bound by the judgment beyond the property in question. So if they can just judge the property, which they're not supposed to be doing, then you know it's in rem. They say it. When they judge the property in question, it is substantially a proceeding in rem. IN space REM. All right, so you can go Google that word, see if somebody makes some videos on it, whatever. All right. So yeah, that's okay. Here we go. Here's another one. Who is this? Oh, I have a law book on admiralty. They say admiralty libels, which is a admiralty complaint against somebody or something, are in two sorts: in personam and in rem. They say in personam against somebody who is named in the lawsuit. And then they say a corporate person asserting a personal liability. Then they say in rem, is virtually unknown outside of Admiralty. So they say anytime you hear the word in rem, it is exclusively Admiralty. They do not use that term in any other context related to courts or law. They say in rem is 100% Admiralty. And they say virtually unknown. Its nature is of a maritime lien. In American Admiralty law, a maritime lien is the lawsuit in rem. In rem. That's the number one word. I should have circled that. All right, let me see who else. Who is this? They say in rem cases can only be prosecuted in district courts where the property is found. But remember, they're going to seize it first. That's how you know it's in rem. They say the suit in rem can be prosecuted in the district where the property is found. They say libels in rem are of civil or maritime, and it shall state the nature and cause, yada, yada, yada. If it is a civil and maritime contract, they say if the libel is in rem, then the property is within the district. If in personam, then the name and the place of the residence. All right. They say a suit in rem cannot be maintained without the service of process upon the property. All right. Let me knock those out. So in rem, somebody say in rem, I-N space bar R-E-M. Type that in the comments. All right, 124, give me 30 more minutes. All right, let's see what else I want to read. All right. So I started this by reading the Supreme Court of California. They said, I don't know if I actually read this, but I'm going to read it again. The Supreme Court of California said that to proceed in rem is distinctly an admiralty remedy. The Supreme Court of California said no state can confer jurisdiction upon its courts to proceed in rem. They say even Louisiana, which is founded on the civil law, they can't do it either. Why? It's not in their constitution. Constitutions create government. That is the thing that tells the government what it can and can't do. If it's not in there, they can't do it. The Supreme Court of California said no state can do it. Why? It's not in their constitutions. When they created the feds, when they created this federal corporation, they gave that power to the feds. Now, the feds aren't supposed to be doing it against the states, but that's a different topic, right? But as far as it relates to the states cannot confer jurisdiction upon its courts to proceed against things. So if they seize it before the court case, it's against the law for them to do it. All right, so that's the Supreme Court of California. I actually have another case. I've been finding these in all the states, but specifically California, Washington State, and the Supreme Court of Georgia. They explicitly say no state can confer jurisdiction upon its courts to proceed in rem. All right. Let's see. This is a federal Supreme Court case. They say maritime law was thought to be an international law merchant. So anytime you're dealing with commerce, there's only one type of court that can do that. So commerce or commercial actions would give them in rem jurisdiction. And you would be amazed how much stuff is commerce that we don't even think about. Like, dang, that's a commercial action. Dang, that's a commercial action. If it's a commercial action, it can be seized because it was never ours to begin with. And that's a whole topic for another day, but you got to understand that. So all these scammers on the internet talking about negotiable instruments and equity. Okay, well, all that subjects you to the will of one guy in a black robe. You don't have no rights with that. Kinda. if there is an actual injured party, a grand jury indictment, and a trial by jury, that is a common law court, and it has nothing to do with commerce. That is the law of the land. So not all courts are commerce. They may be by the result of our ignorance, but that's not technically true. All courts are not commercial. Most courts are commercial. That's a good statement. 95%, right? But if there's an actual injured party, there's an actual grand jury indictment, and there's a petite jury, a common law jury. Okay, well, that's an actual Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court, this is free. This ain't got nothing to do with admiralty. But a Supreme Court doesn't, federal judges and judges who are actually magistrates don't make law. They don't create law. Who are the judges of the law? In your state, the judges of the law are the jury. So I'm citing Supreme Court cases all day, all throughout this, right? But that's not the law. They don't make law. They make opinions and they have findings. And they give answers based on the constitutionality of the thing that is brought before them. But technically, if you just got a trial by jury, see, you only make it to the Supreme Court if you keep going through magistrates and then you appeal the magistrates. Okay, so all of that is admiralty by virtue of who they are. In a county, if we had one good county, okay, and the county was informed that the jury are the actual judges of the law and of the fact, okay, well, we're the Supreme Court every time. Because we wouldn't let any case go through, the grand jury wouldn't let any case go through where there was no injured party. And if there was an actual injured party, okay, well then the jury, the petite jury, are the judges of the law and of the fact. Because that is the common law of England. That is the law of each of the states. And we could nullify whatever would take away our rights, and we could rightfully punish those who create injured parties. Right? So that would be the real Supreme Court, because we would be the ones in charge. That's how it's supposed to be. That's what I'm telling you. We're not supposed to be going before people in black robes. Those guys are supposed to be referees. They're supposed to make sure the tribunal and the ceremony go good. And if you go to the Supreme Court and all these magistrate courts, okay, well, they're for international things. So they have to, if you go to a guy in a black robe and he rules against you, okay, well, you have to keep appealing to go up to and they drag that out. People sit in jail, prisons, don't even go to court because they're subject to the will of a magistrate, right? Okay, well, if he got brought before the jury, well, an informed jury would...
And I want to say I find that true.
Okay, no injured party? Okay, yeah, well, we're going to lunch. We're not dealing with this foolishness. Stop bringing cases up to us, or we're going to perform a
only reason I can say that that's true.
The ones who keep creating cases where there are no
that's what's supposed to happen, because you know when they took,
that's the way it's
did y'all see how court went when they took Jesus to court?
Right, because
who picked him up?
Moved to the same county.
The Roman soldiers, right?
Barbecues and giving out free food every weekend and started informing the people that they're the real judges of the law and that they're not allowed to
see where I'm going with that.
Where there are no injured party, because that
and they turned him over to his people. They said, "What do y'all want to do?"
Things. And we throw out every case
that's Roman law,
admiralty related to commerce. Okay, well, yeah.
Well, here we are. I'm just saying.
That's why they don't show my. That's why they don't show my live to people. You understand now? Because somebody might have actually figured it out. It's that, oh, this common law of England thing's bigger than they thought. Oh, they fought the Revolutionary War over it. Oh, yeah, this must be a big deal, right? So they say maritime was thought, this is the United States Supreme Court, they say maritime law is international law. It is the international law merchant. It is commercial law. And they said it is administered by the several maritime nations of the world. They said this is international law, baby. Anytime you hear admiralty or maritime, or anytime you hear NREM, or anytime you hear anything related to commerce, there's only one type of court that can hear it: an international tribunal, or the several maritime nations of the world. You know what they call it? The United Nations. All right. What else? Here we go again. This is the United States Supreme Court in 2024. This is very important. They said the right to a trial by jury is of such importance and occupies so form a place in our history and jurisprudence that any seeming curtailment of the right has always been and should be scrutinized with the utmost care. So this is the United States Supreme Court in 2024. They said the commentators recognize the right as the glory of the English law. And they cite William Blackstone. And they say it was prized by the American colonists. They said this is the one thing we want above anything is a trial by jury in all cases, civil or criminal. They said when the English, they're talking about the British government, began evading American juries by siphoning adjudications to the juryless Admiralty, Vice Admiralty, and Chancery courts. They said this is the accusation that the American colonists at the Revolutionary War said this is the reason why we're strapping up and dropping bodies. Is because the British government began evading, not giving us a trial by jury, and was bringing us before guys in black robes. You understand that? They said the Supreme Court said this in 2024. They said the juryless Admiralty. Okay, well, what happens in the Admiralty court? You do not get a trial by jury.
TikTok.
You are subject to the will of a guy.
He's just somebody I just stumbled upon. So, and he has
Uh,
paperwork up there, like he has a chalkboard and
they
all
say
kinds
this
of
is in
stuff.
Chancery
Like he's kind of
courts.
like
What's
me.
Chancery? Equity. They said that's not the law of the land.
He should get him a
They said
full
that's
background
international
camera
law.
and do
They
it.
said
So
Americans
you could
condemned
really see
the
it.
British
Or
Parliament for subverting
he
the
should get on a
rights and
PC.
liberties of the colonists.
Because if I could show you what he's
They
looking
said
at, it'd be dope.
representatives demanded that Parliament respect the great and inestimable privilege of being tried by their peers of the
A
vicinage.
lot of what he's
according
reading
to
is
the
Black's
common
Law
law.
Dictionary.
You know where that phrase is taken out of? The Magna Carta.
So
They
yeah,
said the
that's
English, the British
he's
government
just teaching you
continued
how
to
to
try
read.
Americans without juries. And the founders cited
That's
the
what we
practice as a
need.
justification
You know what I mean?
for severing ties
But
with the
I
British
found you
government.
can't meet most
They
people
said that's the one reason why they
on
did
that
it.
level.
Because
You
of this
just
thing
can't.
called
They're not.
Admiralty. What does Admiralty do?
They don't. It's not that they don't care.
Keeps you from getting a trial by jury.
It's that they've got
keeps
their
you
own
from
way.
being before the lawful
And they don't know that they're
judges.
getting in their way. Even me, that's why I said I gotta move around. He's right. Texas has its own constitution. We don't have a civil rights department.
Now this law book is nasty now. They
It
said
might get
having
stupid around
endeavored
here,
to
like for
subvert
real.
the Constitution of the kingdom. So they're talking about England. Having endeavored to subvert the Constitution of the kingdom. What's the Constitution of the kingdom?
And that was done on purpose so they can corner the job
having
market.
endeavored to
If there's
subvert
going
the
to be
Constitution
one.
of the kingdom by breaking
Because
the
those
original
aren't the good
contract
workers.
between king and the people,
And they're
which is
finding
the
out
Magna Carta,
where all the
by
good
the
workers
advice
are.
of
And
Jesuits
they're not
and
satisfied.
other wicked persons violated
They're
the
finding out where all the
fundamental laws.
intelligence is and they're not
They
satisfied.
said duties,
So they're
other
trying to make,
duties in the British colonies by
as we break down into a
taxes
third
on the
world
inhabitants
country,
of these
you'll see a lot
colonies
more.
by extending the
That's why
jurisdiction of the
everybody's
courts of
wearing cowboy
Admiralty
boots and
beyond
stuff
its
right
ancient
now.
limits.
They're
They're
telling you how it's
citing
about to go.
Thomas
Everybody
Jefferson
finna get out in the
for
field. They think
subverting
that's
the
what black people
rights
know. Everybody's
and
gonna be out there.
liberties of the colonists. So what does an Admiralty court do? It keeps you from getting a trial by jury.
Unless you know how things go.
Which is against the law in America.
and they're gonna tell you this is the.
All right. This is from a law book on admiralty. They say they're giving philosophy. All right. I don't know another way to say it. They say the ship. So any type of ship, what kind of ships? Relationships, scholarships, citizenships, right? These are ships.
We're going to have to know.
They said the ship
how to motivate
is a relic of barbarism. All right, so who created ships?
Pretty much how to get out of being property.
Who created
so that we can deal on the international level. That's what China's been telling you.
They said in prehistory,
everybody's taking for granted that we know
the carriage of goods.
That they know that we know these things. We don't know these things. See, they know these things because they come over here and
admiralty law. They say admiralty law.
That's why you never see them in court.
Started with this thing called the Rhodian law. Rhodian, H-R.
That's why you never see them getting governed.
Odian.
So you can't do that.
Law. That would have been the first, law books on admiralty.
They understand
They
policy.
wouldn't have called it admiralty like that. They would have just said maritime back in the day.
And their lawyers do too.
So they say in
so they never go
and
in the courts,
the carriage of goods and people over great distances. All right, so this where all this traffic issues.
Some
you
of
see people
them
on
do, don't
YouTube
get me
complaining
wrong.
about the right to travel and all this stuff. Okay, they say, well, all of this is where this comes from.
Yeah,
right? They say this
but you have to be. You
transportation
can't be submitted under
in the world
contract
of
like me. I have a
commerce
driver's license. I'm submitted
from
under
the
contract. I
earliest
have
times
to turn
until
in that contract,
comparatively
and I have to figure out how to get from up under that
all
contract.
traffic, which is under the definition of commerce,
Because once you do it one time, it's assumed you'll always do it because you've done it.
All right, so any
It's
traffic
like
issues,
once forgiven,
there's
once
only one type
sin,
of
never
court that deals
forgiven.
with those things, lawfully or unlawfully. There's only one type of
You've
court that
got
deals
to
with those things.
know how to.
They said the
What does
origin
it say,
of the words admiral and
what is that word
admiralty
that we
carry our thoughts back to the
repent?
Middle Ages. They said as manufacturing progressed,
See how simple that
commerce develops. Okay, so how do they
all this comes
develop
right
commerce?
out of the Bible.
Through the Industrial
Egyptian.
Revolution, through all of these great
Yeah.
what's the word? Innovation.
Pretty much.
That's not the word I'm looking for, but innovation. When they have the ability to strip things down. I guess it is innovation, but that's not the word I'm looking for. But whenever they can make a big process, dang it, what's the word? You know what I'm saying? Whenever they can, efficient is some word related to efficient. Well, the way they can make something, a process more efficient. Okay, well, they say as that progresses, as manufacturing gets more streamlined, as they make things more easier and convenient, okay, well, commerce is going to naturally develop. I said this the other day. Simplify, that's another word. I said it, I talked about cash versus swiping debit cards. Okay, well, you got Apple Pay now, right? They just, it would be crazy not to use a debit card now for everything, right? You can use Cash App. You can use whatever, name it. Okay, well, as manufacturing and streamlining and efficiency and simplifying develops, convenience, yep. Okay, well, commerce is going to explode, and it would be crazy for you not to participate in commerce. Come on now. I remember I tell y'all all the time about the TV show 1923, and this dude introduces to these people in Montana the washer machine and the refrigerator. He says, oh, yeah, everybody doing this in New York. What you mean? What you mean you're not going to participate? Oh, they already on the grid. We got this thing called the grid, and everybody's on electricity. And you pay us monthly for electricity. You ain't going to want to live without this thing called electricity. Oh, yeah, they got us. They said, what do you mean? That dude, the father of the family, he said, well, if I get on your electricity and then I use everything and buy everything that requires electricity, well, he said, well, I'm not working for myself anymore. I'm working for you. Okay, well, that's what they say. As manufacturing progresses, well, commerce develops. And commerce immediately requires transportation. This transport was almost invariably by water. Okay, well, who mastered this water thing? These merchants from Canaan and Phoenicia. Okay, well, they say this transportation of all of these streamlining processes, this transport was almost invariably by water. They say the ancient world
and most
was
of our
situated
presidents
around the shores
have
of the
been
Great
incorporated with
Ocean.
ONI,
Later,
naval
as
intelligence.
they say traffic on land was subject. So they say
that's what we're lacking right now. But let's go.
That word roads is a maritime term because it came from the Rhodian law. They say as commerce develops, okay, well, we got to figure out a way to get this thing from the ports to the craziest part, to a place called Oklahoma, to the mountains in Utah, to the mountains in Colorado, to Wyoming. Y'all seen these clips on TikTok where the truck drivers, the wind is so crazy that the 18-wheeler flips over? Okay, they said this commerce, baby, we got to get it out there. They said we're going to put a Walmart everywhere. Or Dollar General. They're going to put a Dollar General everywhere. It's a Dollar General in the craziest places, y'all. You been to Mississippi? Boy, they got a Dollar General everywhere in the middle of nowhere, right? They said as commerce, as manufacturing progresses, right? They said, oh, you put what? Let me, this is a great transition. Ships. Okay, how do we get things? Everything in our reality comes off of a ship. That's a great segue. Everything. I said this the other day. Everything in our reality comes off a ship. It comes off of a ship from another country, and it gets immediately on an 18-wheeler. And then that 18-wheeler goes from the port to wherever. Think of the craziest place. South Dakota. You ever been in South Dakota? Oh my gosh. They got crazy mountains in South Dakota. They got crazy hills. You ever been to the middle of Pennsylvania? Bro, it ain't nothing but mountains and woods up in there. You ever been to West Virginia? They take that thing from the port to the mountains of West Virginia. They take that thing to the middle of nowhere. You ever been to Nevada? Okay, there's nothing out there. Nothing. They built a whole thing called Las Vegas. Las Vegas is in the middle of nowhere, y'all. In the desert. Like, I get New York. That's how they got us. They knew it because they changed New York. That's why New York is the way it is now. New York, they were the first to get commerce for real. That's why New York will always have the latest. They'll always have the newest shows, movies, advertising. You want to know what commerce looks like? Go to Times Square in New York City. Okay, well, they spread that to everywhere. You go to a place like Utah, there's not supposed to be a place called Salt Lake City. You've been to Salt Lake City? That's all commerce. You've been to Los Angeles, they're on the water. So I give them that. I'll give Miami that. I'll give New York that. I'll give Washington State that, or Seattle that. But like Oklahoma, come on now. Everything in our reality comes off of a ship. Really what they should say is, as manufacturing progresses and commerce develops, right? Well, as production stops, then commerce will develop, because commerce is really defined as I'm trying not to get the reflections of the monitor. Well, and I know you can't see this regardless if I do it right or not, but buying and selling is commerce. That's really what it is. You go to the definition of commerce, they say it's buying and selling. The definition of merchant is they say they use ships to buy and sell. It's people who own ships. Okay, well, buying and selling is not producing. That's how Walmart works. Walmart don't produce something. What do? They buy it from a manufacturer, somebody who manufactures it, and then they sell it to people who buy it. So it's just that's why they call it retail, right? Because they didn't tailor it. They retailed it, right? So Walmart, you name it, Target, whoever, Costco, whoever. Okay, well, they don't produce anything. They just put up a building. They create a market. Right? And that's all. I go to Walmart. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not special. I'm just saying this is how it works. Because we don't produce anything anymore. We don't know how to clean clothes without a washing machine. We don't know how to preserve food without a refrigerator. They say, okay, well, as we make things more convenient, you're not going to want to do those things anymore. And then we will get you on commerce. Okay, well, the same thing happened to our law. As we stop caring about the law, as we stop talking about the common law of England, as we stop doing trial by juries and start hiring these people called attorneys, okay, well, as they streamline that process, they can take our rights. How? Because we don't do things for ourselves anymore. You understand how Admiralty works now? Admiralty is really a military jurisdiction. They said commerce develops through ease and convenience. Ease and convenience. That's what these merchants mastered. They said, how do we make this thing so easy that they don't have no choice but to participate? Right? How do we get them? Because if we can make it on a mass scale, that's really what commerce is. Commerce is on a mass scale. Because if you produce the food from your land and then you sold it to your community, well, that's not considered commerce. I remember I watched, I don't know if it was a TikTok or a YouTube video or a news article, but I guess I don't pay attention to the feds, but apparently Donald Trump shut down people selling from China, whatever. They were beefing with China or something. And these farmers in Arkansas were complaining that they weren't making the money they had because they couldn't interact with China or whatever it was. And I was like, because you relied on the manufacturing process instead of taking care of the people in Arkansas, okay, well, now you're suffering. Because if you don't have access to China no more, which all our crap comes from, right? All of our cameras, phone, they all come from Asia, right? Because it's cheap labor from them, right? Yeah, tariffs, whatever. Okay, well, if these farmers would have invested in the people of Arkansas, well, the people of Arkansas would have always taken care of them. But because you don't produce anything and you don't allow the people of Arkansas to produce things, I'm just using Arkansas as an example. Okay, well, commerce is what you're subject to. And when commerce fails you and you can't produce things on your own, all right, well, this is the reality of what you're complaining about. Because if you just produced in Florida and sold it to the people in Florida, see, it would be different. See, how the country started is we would sell to other countries. Well, now other countries sell to us. We're not supposed to be taking from other countries. We're supposed to be selling to other countries. That would be okay, lawful. Right. They produce things cheaper overseas. And now, because it's so cheap overseas and it's seemingly more expensive here, well, if they would have started off with just the people there, they would have never had to worry about that. But now everything in our reality is international. You go look at the can.
Have you ever wondered
none of our food is
how is it cheaper
any of the states
for you to make
they say they get our steaks from Argentina and all
China?
They say they do all that
in order for me to have a shirt over
here. They say they get our beans, our potatoes from Mexico. We don't do nothing here no more. Why? Because people relied on the ease and convenience of commerce.
How is it cheaper for you
if they can manufacture it overseas, we don't have to produce things
from China
here.
Instead of getting it from somebody
because it's more costly. It's harder to produce it here.
You see how
right?
The manipulation
that's how commerce develops. And
that's weird, isn't it?
They're talking about commerce, and this is a book on Admiralty. It's called The Law of Admiralty, and they're talking about commerce. Okay, because there's only one type of court that can hear commercial things. They said traffic on land is subject to commerce. They said that's how they do it. How do they get things from point A to point B? A ship today in 2025, a ship and then an 18-wheeler. Well, why is it cheaper to produce things overseas? Primarily because commerce is already engulf those nations, so they deprive them. Remember, it's only one group of people producing commerce. And so commerce really steals from you. And so all these other nations have been on commerce for years. It took a while for them to get to us. They had to wait till the Civil War to get to us, because before then we produced things in the States, right? And they use child labor, all type of stuff. Is it really cheaper? No, probably not. It's probably, remember, as manufacturing, it's easier now. They've been doing this for years, and we haven't been doing this for years. We haven't been producing things here since the Civil War on a grand scale. So they've been producing things and having a manufacturing process that is streamlined in our reality since the Civil War. So because China can produce an iPhone probably like that, they probably snapping together iPad. They can produce it. They got machines that can produce a phone. They say this phone costs $1,000. That phone costs $2 to produce, because they got robots and stuff now. Y'all, come on, y'all know. They got vending machines they've been doing software for years. They've been snapping together iPad. That iPad don't cost no $500. That iPad costs $11, and then they sell it to us for $11 or for $1,100. All right, so we have to produce things on our own. That's what I'm getting to, but I'm not here to talk about commerce. I'm just telling you how it works. All right. What else? Let me read. I'm trying to wrap this up. I'm almost at 2 hours. All right, yada, yada, yada. Got a Supreme Court case that says the courts of admiralty are in contradistinction to the common law. All right, let me delete that. Juryless admiralty. All is international law.
Yeah, he better to wrap it up. I'm gonna let him get on up out of there because he really just going over cases, more and more evidence. But that's how you read it. That's how you read that stuff. It's gonna be some people in big trouble. Some people in big trouble. I think it's a bunch of people in big trouble and don't know they're in big trouble. But yeah, man, I've been on like an hour. You know, I don't never be on long. So, go watch the rest of half this game with my girl. And